Okay, we're going to look at compound interest. So when we borrow money, and when we return the money we borrowed, we have to return the full amount that we borrowed as well as a little bit extra because we used someone else's money. That little bit extra is called interest. And similarly, when we invest in money, we gain a little bit extra. That's a little bit of interest as well. So last year in year 9, we looked at this thing called simple interest. Interest. The formula for simple interest was I equals PRT. So I is your amount in interest, P is your principal amount or your initial amount, R is your interest rate, and T is your time. When we looked at simple interest, the interest is a fixed amount every year, and it depends only on the principal amount. So interest is a fixed amount. Every year or every time period, and it depends, or the amount of interest depends only on the principal, the initial amount. So for example, if you're investing, if you're borrowing $100 at 4% per annum, then you only have to pay back an extra interest of $4 every year. And it's the same $4 every single year. It doesn't increase or decrease. Now, in contrast with compound interest, the interest depends on the current amount. So what I mean by that is, let's look at an example. Suppose we invest $400 at 10% per annum. Now, per annum means per year. So let's have a look at this. So in our first year, the initial amount that we start off with is $400. And then the amount of interest gained, because we're investing, based on the $400 is 10% of that 400 because it's 10% per annum. So the amount of interest is 10% of $400, which if you multiply through gives you 40. So your total final amount would be $440. Now with compound interest, because it's 10% per annum or per year, it depends on what we start off with in that year. So in the second year investment, we start off with $440 instead of the $400, because we now have an extra $40 in the account because of the interest. So the starting amount in our second year is $440. And so the interest amount is 10% of what we started off with in that year, which is $440. And 10% of that is $44. So the total amount that we get at the end of year 2 is $484, if you're adding the principal and the interest. So with compound interest, the amount of interest changes every year and depends on what amount you started off with. And that's a difference between simple and compound interest. Simple interest is a fixed interest amount, whereas compound interest, the interest amount changes. It depends on what you started off with. And so the amazing compound interest formula to use is A equals P 1 plus R over 100 all to the power of N. Now what do those letters mean? Well, P is your principal amount, and it'll be in dollars. A is your final amount, and that's in dollars. Your R is your interest rate. It's in percentages, and it's the interest rate per period of investments. So if you're investing per year or per month or per week, your R changes. And accordingly, N is your number of periods that you're investing for. We'll do some examples in a moment to see how to use this compound interest formula. In addition to the compound interest formula, we also have the relationship that the final amount is the sum of what you started off with plus the amount of interest gained or having to pay back. So let's do an example. So example 1. So Anthony's investment of $4,000 is compounded at 8.4% per annum over 5 years. Determine the amount he will have after 5 years if the interest is paid monthly, and round to the nearest cent. Alright, so with these compound interest questions, the first thing we need to do is identify what your A is, your P is, your R, and your N is. Okay, so we're told that Anthony's investment is $4,000. So we're starting off with 4,000. So P equals $4,000. We're told that it's compounded at 8.4% per annum over 5 years. So your R is 8.4 and your N is 5. Determine the amount he will have after 5 years if the interest is paid monthly. Now this is an interesting sentence. So it tells us that our N is 5 years and that our rate is 8.4%. So we also have been told that the interest is paid monthly. Now, if we're paying monthly, then the number of times they have to pay it off is 5 lots of 12, because 5 years and there's 12 months per year, so altogether we have 60 number of periods. And because we multiplied by 12 to take account of the monthly, in our rate, the 8.4 is a percentage rate per year, and we have to change it to monthly. So rather than just 8.4, we have to go 8.4 divided by 12 because it is now monthly. And if you divide that, 8.4 divided by 12 gives you 0.7%. Now, take note that because it is monthly, that's why we have 12. If your question was saying something about quarterly, then you would either multiply or divide by 12 because there's 4 quarters in a year. If your question was talking about weekly, then you'd be dividing or multiplying by 52 because there's 52 weeks in a year. Fortnightly, there's 26 fortnights in a year, and if it's just a pure yearly thing, then it's 1 year because there's 1 year in a year. Or if you have a daily, then we say there's 365 days in a year. And so because of the interest is paid monthly, we have to accordingly change our R and our N. So you got to be careful of that. So once we figured out what our P, R, and N is, we need to work out what our A is. So let's go and write down our default formula. So A is P bracket 1 plus R over 100 to the N. So in our case, our P was 4,000. 1 plus, remember our R is 0.7 over 100 to the power of N. Now remember, N was adjusted to be 60. So you throw that into a calculator. It should get you 6,078.95. And because it's a word problem, let's finish off with a sentence conclusion. So therefore, Anthony will have $ $6,078.95. So make sure you read the question carefully. See is the interest accrued monthly, weekly, yearly, whatever it is. You've got to take account of it by multiplying or dividing by the number of those periods in a year. That's pretty much it for compound interest. So to-do list. That's it. Have fun.